What's up? This is Aaron from Slab Stocks. This is the Sports Card Strategy Show, and there is no offseason.
Hey guys, this is Jay with Wildcard. You're listening to the Sports Card Strategy Show. There is no offseason.
What's up, everybody? I'm Paul Hickey with NoOffSeason.com. This is the Sports Card Strategy Show. Don't forget to get a free 30-day trial at NoOffSeason.com today to help you make money flipping sports cards, build your sports card investment portfolio, get unlimited advice from our experts, and take Sports Card School to navigate the hobby. That's NoOffSeason.com. Get your free 30-day trial today. All the data we use on the Sports Card Strategy Show is from MarketMoversApp.com. Use code NOOFFSEASON at MarketMoversApp.com to get 20% off for life after a free 14-day trial. All right, let's get to the Sports Card Strategy. Making money flipping sports cards is what we're here to help you do, everyone. I am Paul Hickey with NoOffSeason.com. This is the Sports Card Strategy Show. Get excited for a phenomenal show. Today, October 14th, I'm going to talk about takeaways from the last two card shows that I've set up at. We're going to do our top sports card opportunities to buy raw and grade, which always gets me pumped up. Spoiler alert in terms of the report that I'm going to put out in Q4 later on in Q4. It already is Q4. But towards the end of December, at the latest, it will be the end of December when I'll put out a report of what worked best for me in 2024. And I'll include some data from our one-on-one members that I've aggregated together just so that it's not just my stuff, but it's a good sample size, a good representation of the sports card flipping market. What worked best for us, right? Spoiler alert, raw to grade. Raw to grade works very, very well. And we'll talk more about that in today's episode. And a very, very special guest will join me. Many of you probably have heard of the podcast Cards to the Moon and the Instagram account 5 Card Guys. They are some of the best guys in the hobby, to be honest with you. And they don't necessarily focus on what we focus on here at the Sports Card Strategy Show, but they provide some really good hobby content. And if you haven't checked out their show, you should. And you should stay tuned for the entire guest appearance from Clark Kim, the main man over at Cards to the Moon and 5 Card Guys. He hits on a phrase that I thought was very intriguing, so stay tuned for that. What is a non-PC collection? A non-PC collection. Think about that, and we'll hit on it later. But first, are you ready to start grading your cards? CGC Cards is the perfect place to slab your favorite sports cards. From their crystal clear holders to their affordable pricing, CGC Cards is the perfect stop for your grading needs. Go to cgccards.com to start grading today. I don't know why I read that off of my show notes. I know it by heart right now, since I say it in every episode that I do, but I do believe in CGC Cards and what they're doing down in Sarasota, Florida, and worldwide. By the way, they're worldwide. Their headquarters is in Sarasota, Florida. They're great people, great grading company. They've only been grading sports cards since 2021, and that's why there's not much sales data out there for CGC sports cards. However, they're backed by the largest coin and comics and other collectibles in terms of those verticals, and CGC comics, CGC coins and things like that are very, very well known in the hobby. They do very, very well in terms of their secondary market activity. So we're hoping to give the folks over at CGC Cards a boost on the secondary market and a boost in terms of getting people to grade with them. A lot of our grading plays that we talk about on the Sports Card Strategy Show and our formula-based rankings at NoOffSeason.com are based on grading at PSA, but we do also support CGC. Sean Red 5 Cards is in the house. Terry Anderson in the house. Happy Monday. And Michael Bush in the house. Michael Bush says, I have a question, ? So Michael, thanks for joining us. Michael, is that a question that you have a question, or do you have a question? And either way, the best way to have it answered is to go to nooffseason.com/ask get a free 30-day trial, and I will definitely answer it on the premium pod. Ryan Painter, what's up, says, go Guardians. Ryan, I love you, man. Ryan's one of the best people in the NoOffSeason.com fam. He knows I'm a Tigers fan, and his Guardians beat my Tigers in Game 5, breaking my heart on Saturday. My son and I were pumped when the Tigers went up 1-0, and then it was over from there. Tarek Skubal played well until he let up the grand slam, and the run just continued, and the Tigers couldn't get it done. But a good run from my Detroit Tigers. I know Drew Adams is a premium member that's from the Detroit area, so Drew, shout out to you. Terry Anderson says, go Dodgers. All right, I can get on board with Dodgers. I'm a Shohei guy. Now that my Tigers are out, my son's going to be rooting for the Yankees, but I might be rooting for the Dodgers. So hello to all of you at youtube.com/Paul Hickey in the live chat. Hello to all of you on Instagram watching. I see all of you. And on Apple and Spotify, you are where most people join from. So definite shout out to all of you on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Nick Morris Real Estate, Monkey Reg Fulton, Repeat Cards, Jay Fleming 50/50, Mike Erickson Barkov Collector, Magic Manalo Card Shop, J Rod Trading Cards, Hester Sports Cards, Howls Co. That's my guy. That's my guy Jake. What's up, Jake? How you doing, brother? Schust J, the Reserve Clause, Berlin Rookie Cards, Mateo B3 4-Card Continuum, L Smith, Terry Coleman, Big City Collectibles, MV3 Cards, V Bros Collectibles, W Parker. What's up, everybody? And we got our guy, In Turner. In Turner's back in the lab. Remember when Connor was in the lab? In Turner has usurped Connor. In Turner is now, he's been elevated. So In Turner pretty much runs the lab. We're trying to get Jake, who I mentioned a minute ago, to join In Turner in the lab. In Turner says I'm the GOAT. In Turner, I think you're the GOAT. I think you're the GOAT, In Turner. Thank you for all of your support. DPH in the house. Dan Hickey. This is my father, everybody. This is my father, Dan Hickey, DPH. What's up? The man, the myth, the real legend right there. I would be nowhere without the big man DPH up in Michigan. And my Michigan State Spartans took on the Northern Michigan Wildcats, I think, in a exhibition game. And it was a tribute to Tom Izzo. And that was a good thing to watch yesterday. I was flipping back and forth watching that and the Red Zone channel with my son. And we were pumped. So everybody, let's talk takeaways from the last two card shows, because some of you, actually many of you who are listening right now, I met over the weekend at the Nashville card show, the Nash Dational, if you will. And it was interesting. It was interesting. I like to keep it positive. I don't like hobby drama. I would say the last two card shows I've set up at were in Franklin, Tennessee, which is about, where I live. That's the card show is at the Ag Expo Center. It's the second year that I've attended, the first year that I set up as a vendor. And it was a strong memorabilia show. It was at the end of September. It was actually literally, funny enough, like the last day that Pete Rose was alive. He was there signing autographs, and then he sadly passed the next day. So it was that weekend at the end of September at the Franklin Williamson County Agricultural Expo Center. I set up as a vendor. It was my first time setting up as a vendor. I met many of you. Thank you for coming up and saying hello. Hopefully you got a free t-shirt and, took a picture and we chatted and everything like that. And then same thing at this past weekend, October 11th, 12th, and 13th at the Nash Dational. Many of you know the Nash Dational. It's the big, a lot of people call it the big show in Nashville, because there's a show every 2 weeks at Lighthouse, the Lighthouse School Gymnasium. And then there's a show every quarter by the same promoter, Jeff Roberts, good guy, does the Nash Dational. Shout out Jeff and everybody who attended. I had a blast. Let me just say, I'm very, very grateful to be part of this community here at nooffseason.com. Very, very grateful to know many of you personally now, and will probably meet several of you personally in the future as I continue to go to card shows. However, I will say this, the volume of foot traffic and the amount of deals were far less at the past 2 shows that I've set up at than they were at any show previous to that I've ever attended or set up at. And it wasn't that the shows were bad. And I really don't believe that it has anything to do with the state of the hobby. So let me just come out and say that. Let me just come out and say, I don't believe that the state of the hobby is doing anything other than growing exponentially. And I do have data to back that up. But talking about card shows, I'm going to say a few things. A lot of window shopping, a lot of browsing, not a lot of deals, not a lot of buying. I will talk about some of the big deals I made here in a second. Which, first of all, it's worth setting up for me personally, because I'm there to be part of the hobby and participate in the hobby and support the hobby in many ways, right? So like being a vendor, it helps the show promoter. It helps, not only am I buying a table, but I'm spending my time there. I'm helping bring people into the show with the Sports Card Strategy Show and the awareness that it brings. I'm set up. I'm giving away, nice giveaway items to people that approach the table. I'm having conversations. I'm making deals. I'm helping people out. We're talking. I've got friends like Mosaic Joe. Farmer Joe was there all day with me on Saturday. So that was awesome. I met new friends like the guy who sat up next to me, Blake, great guy. We had a good, shout out Blake. Congrats. He's getting married here in about a month, and then he's going on his honeymoon. So he was there trying to make money for his honeymoon. Met a lot of people. Saw my guys from Nash Cards, talked to them. The guys from Pretty Cool Cards setting up. John setting up in Nolensville. John has a new card shop that he's setting up in Nolensville. Pretty Cool Cards. He's a good guy. So there's a lot of positivity at these shows, right? Really not a whole lot of negativity. But it is, as a vendor, like from a vendor standpoint, I did talk to a lot of vendors who felt the same way I did in terms of the Nash National. You have an 800 table show, but you don't have foot traffic for 800 tables. You have foot traffic for maybe 200 tables. And so there appears to be an oversaturation maybe of shows in general in the world and in the US, of oversaturation of the frequency of shows, and then maybe too many tables at certain shows. And I'm not saying that that's bad for the Nashville Card Show. It's great for the Nashville Card Show. The promoter, everybody, they make a lot of money on that. They have the ability to continue to support the hobby with setting up 800 tables. But when you're a vendor, you realize there's only foot traffic for about 200. You start to think, is it better if I just attend the show? Because I think from an attendee standpoint, it was probably a pretty darn good show. And I'd be curious to know if any of you were at the Nashville Card Show, or let's throw it out there this way. Were any of you at a card show recently? Let's say dating back in the last 3 months. Let's not include the National because that's different. But let's say, look, were you at a card show? And did you notice as an attendee that it was pretty light foot traffic? You were able to approach every single table, talk to dealers for a long time, make deals, try to negotiate. If the dealer, were the dealers frustrated? You know what I mean? Michael Bush is in the house. He says, I live in Nashville, Tennessee. I went to the show at the fairgrounds. I totally agree. I was there. There were too many options. So it's interesting that Michael Bush, who asked if he could ask a question, and I directed him to nooffseason.com/ask, is chiming in. Thank you, Michael, for saying, look, Paul, I'm experiencing the same thing you're experiencing at literally the same card show. And then, Michael, we'll get to your question here in a second in terms of your PSA, your question about PSA. Zach Ellsworth, who's a premium member at nooffseason.com, and he sends in cards regularly to get graded as part of his premium membership. So thank you, Zach. Zach says, I hit a show in Columbus, Ohio area this weekend, and the same thing happened. Poor foot traffic and no deals to be made. So I don't know if it's the season, right? It's the fall. We've talked on the Sports Card Strategy Show frequently about the fact that prices do start to dip around this time of year, just overall. But everybody knows that the same cards rise in price pretty much. If you're holding a card that's a legitimate card, it might start to dip this time of year, but if it's a legitimate card, if it's the right card for the right player, it's going to rise again probably in January, February, March, right? It just does. It's the pattern that happens every single year for the most part. Unless a player, and there's exceptions, right? Like if a player gets injured or he or she does something stupid off the field or whatever, or off the playing surface, that's fine. However, for the most part, prices rise after the new year and they dip before Christmas. So we're in the phase of the calendar, the months of the calendar where the prices start to dip. Now that might have an impact as well on some pricing at card shows where vendors don't want to budge on the dip in pricing. That could prevent some deals. It also could be a microcosm, and this is what I think it is. I think that card shows are a microcosm of the fact that there's still the same supply, and in some cases increased supply of certain players, and a little bit less interest in acquiring cards this time of year. I think that's why prices dip, and I think the card show lack of foot traffic actually is a microcosm of that. Okay, so I think it's actually expected to a certain extent, and I heard some stories about the Culture Collision event that was in September. I can't speak to it firsthand because I didn't attend. But what's interesting about the fact that I didn't attend is that's an example. That's a microcosm of what we're talking about. The fact that I didn't attend Culture Collision because I had family stuff, school stuff for my kids in September that's not normally there in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August. But it is there in September because school's back. Activities are in full swing that are related to school and related to family. The Culture Collision show in September, I heard, didn't do as well. Not as many people showed up. And I don't think that has anything to do with the people who put on Culture Collision. I think that is an example of where the hobby starts to head this time of year in the fall. At the end of Q3, beginning of Q4, things start to slow down in the hobby because people are doing other things. And it's not that everything starts to slow down in the hobby. It's just that the volume of sales typically goes down a little bit. And because the volume of sales typically goes down a little bit, the prices go down a little bit, which is frustrating. It is. We don't want to see the prices go down, but hey, look, in every market, prices can't keep going up. So if you're new to this, just know that that's kind of the pattern. And if you're new to this and you're looking to buy cards, now's a great time to buy cards. It really is. Now you have to be maybe more patient, but you can get great deals. So interesting. Again, drop a comment below at youtube.com/Paul Hickey if you are listening to this back on Apple and Spotify. And hello to George Schurer. Hello to Jared McDaniel. Jared McDaniel says, what about them Lions? Yeah, great game at Dallas. Unfortunately, we lost Aiden Hutchinson, but we're looking darn good. Who's your card guy in the house? And it does look like maybe every NFC North team will make the playoffs. So hopefully, I mean, the Lions have to keep winning, Jared, because if they don't keep winning, they could be in jeopardy of missing the playoffs because the NFC North is so good. Johnny Cashville in the house says, my guy, best show on YouTube. Really appreciate that, Johnny Cashville. Johnny Cashville, you're in Nashville. Were you at the Nash National? Have you heard what I've just said early on in this episode where I'm seeing less foot traffic as a vendor at the last two card shows I set up at? Just curious. Here's a couple other observations from takeaways from the last two card shows. Less people buying for repackers. And I think that is in hindsight, that's a reason why there was more action at the previous card shows. Because when I think about like the deals that I made at the National, the deals that I made at the Nash National back in March, the deals that I made at the Dallas show that I went to in May with Lefty and Chase and Cody Krim and those guys at Roadshow Cards. Those deals, not all of them, but a lot of the deals I made were, I could tell, with people who were buying for repackers. Like they'd come in and they'd want to buy everything I had at 90% of comps. And the things that I was ahead on, like, yeah, like, sure, you know, and so a lot of deals. One other thing that is, again, this is all anecdotal, but I think it makes sense. Because I've gone to a lot of card shows in the last couple of years since I moved back to the US from Spain, a lot of the relationships I've made with people who are buying cards and transacting the most at card shows are college age young men. So young men that are age, say 17 to 23 that are and like early on in college for whatever reason, early on in their college education, right? And so this is very anecdotal, but I mean, it's probably more than 3 or 4 people that I know personally that I talk to. And they've told me this, like when I was with them at Fanatics Fest, and they all would tell me, look, because I would ask them, look, what are you guys going to do when you start college again? Like when college classes start up again, right? And they do tell me that, like, look, our card flipping game sort of ends, you know, for the most part. We're trying to move everything we've got before we start classes up again in the fall. And so I think then you may or may not have a lack of those people traveling to these shows that we're talking about, making things happen, making things move. What you do have are kids, and mostly young boys that are under the age of 11, that I know that the hobby needs, right? And I know that the hobby does a great job of encouraging to participate in the hobby because you know, you've got a lot of Topps Rip Nights, you've got a lot of things are geared, or you've got like trade up challenges, which has become like the cringiest phrase in my vernacular, whether I hear it or whether I say it. I just personally don't like it. Because what's happened is you now have a lot of these, say 7 to 11 or 12-year-old boys that are at these card shows where we're trying to move different cards. Like we have a different audience than these guys. And I mean, look, some of them have cards that are interesting that we want to buy. I'm not saying they all don't, but I'm saying at the last 2 card shows I've been to, little kids selling crap. Okay. Little kids selling crap. I know most of you are like, Paul, get to the point. What are you trying to say here? That's what I'm trying to say. Little kids trying to sell crap, trade up challenges where they've got crap. Nobody wants crap in the hobby. Like, let's just say it. Nobody wants crap. And there's a lot of crap out there. And look, there's going to be a lot of people telling me, hey, Paul, simmer down on your commentary here, because if there weren't this crap, blah, 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 the stuff that you're trying to move wouldn't be as valuable. I get that. Hey, Paul, simmer down here on your commentary, your soapbox about all these base cards, all these whatever, all this crap that you're talking about. Here's my thing. I'm going to propose something to the nooffseason.com fam right now. Look, I'm not upset about base cards, because base cards, if you look at the formula, and we're going to talk about the formula in a second. If you look at the formula-based sports card rankings at nooffseason.com, okay, there's a lot of base cards that do really, really well raw to grade. Okay, so I don't hate base cards. And I do acknowledge, yes, we need base cards so that there is stuff that is rare. Okay, because without base cards, then everything would be a base card. You need base cards to have rarity. I get that. Here's what I don't like. I don't like that there's so many freaking releases. Okay, I don't like that there's Luminance and Chronicles, and I don't like that Topps put out composite football, because there's all this crap. Like, nobody, like, base cards of Prism, Optic, Donruss, Hoops, whatever. Like, I get that, but like, do we need 85 million releases from each company? And then within that release, do we need all these different types of crappy base cards? I think we could probably do a better job of that. And you know, however, I realize that to a certain extent, we can all be talking out of both sides of our mouth when we talk about this, because we need kids in the hobby. Absolutely. And we need crap in the hobby. But I'm also just sick of crap, and sometimes I'm sick of kids. I'm sorry. I just am. Like, and Zach Ellsworth says my kid is an expert crap seller. I love all you guys. Hopefully you know where I'm coming from there. Here's a couple of things that I want to point out. We're going to get into more raw to grade, and then we're going to talk about the raw to grade formula. But I will say this, not a lot of wins on cards where I bought them already graded as a PSA 10. Not a lot of wins. Not that I'm losing money, and not that there's not a place for those, but just not a lot of wins. I mean, tough to move cards for a profit when you buy big, nice cards that are already graded in PSA 10. The positive is that you bought the right card, and you probably bought it at an okay time. If you're listening to the Sports Card Strategy Show, they're just harder to sell, and they're harder to sell for a profit because they're so nice and they're already in a PSA 10 slab. And so the wins that I made over the weekend at this last show, the Nash National, were raw to grade bigger cards. There was a Paolo Banchero 2022 Contenders Optic rookie ticket auto that I bought Panini sealed at the National for $700. And I knew must have been a redemption, right? Because it was Panini sealed. Then there was a second Paolo Banchero, just a Contenders rookie ticket auto that I bought raw in a top loader at Fanatics Fest. And I paid around $280, between $280 and $300 for that one. Both were just under recent comps. I got each of them graded, and they each got a PSA 10. Okay, so now those cards I moved at the Nash National for a significant profit of around $600 total profit with those two cards. And so if you look at, hey, okay, Paul made $300 on one, $300 on the other cash transaction, not having to pay the eBay fees, that right there is the move, right? So I'm just trying to have all of you learn from what I'm doing, and I'm also learning from what I'm doing. I'm doing a lot. The other thing I did was I bought a Tua Contenders rookie ticket auto at Fanatics Fest. Okay, so this was back in August, and I bought it raw, and the PSA 10 of that back in August was close to $1,000, and the raw was around 300. So I got a deal. I got it negotiated, and I got a deal of around 250. And then I graded it at PSA. I got it back last week, and I put it out at the Nash National this past weekend, and it got a 10. By the way, it got a 10. That's critical. And I put it out, and I looked at comps, and I was like, okay, this is now at 450. It's down from $1,000 down to 450 because it's Tua, right? But I put it out because I'm thinking I'm only $300 into this card, so if I can sell it for 450 to somebody who wants it at recent comps, that's a win for me, and that's what happened. So shout out to listener, I think his name's Hunter, who bought that from me, and I tagged him in my IG story. So Hunter, if you're listening, go check out Sports Card Strategy on IG and see if you can see yourself. I didn't get your Instagram profile, so DM me if you want, and I'll repost it and tag you in the story. But Hunter bought my Tua Contenders rookie ticket auto PSA 10. He was excited to get it because he's a Tua collector, and 450. So he got it at a discount based on the fact that card's down from $1,000. I still made $150 cash. So the raw to grade move is great. And we're going to talk a little bit more about raw to grade here in a second when we look at the formula-based rankings and the top sports card opportunities to buy raw and grade from the formula. And of course, to get all of those rankings, just go to nooffseason.com, get a free 30-day trial. There's going to be more member benefits. Paid member benefits are coming out of the woodworks at nooffseason.com. So stay tuned for that. But last thought there is, so think about when you buy like a Contenders optic or a Contenders rookie ticket auto with an on-card auto, right? Now, not all of them are on-card autos, so you gotta make sure. But I think with an on-card auto of a top player, even if it gets a 9 at PSA, you're probably not going to lose money on it, because if you bought it at a good raw price, you're probably not going to lose money on a 9. You might break even on a 9, but you're probably not going to lose money, and you're going to get the upside of a 10 by grading it. You're going to try for the upside of a 10. If you get a 9, you can always crack it out and resubmit it to PSA to try to get that 10. It's a big card, so it's probably worth it. Now, if you get an 8, you could crack it out and sell it raw potentially. And that could be your worst case scenario. You might lose a little bit of money, but if you do that over and over and over and over again, when you get the 10s, they're going to more than make up for when you get the 8s and the 9s. So I really, really think that the raw to grade, raw to grade is the way to go. And we're still going to do the already graded show on Wednesdays. We're still going to do, in that already graded show, we're going to do the graded to raw, where we talk about what are the top cards to buy graded, crack, and sell raw, because that's a play. And the next card show that I'll be going to with all of this in mind is the next Fanatics Fest in Orlando. So I'm going to be there. I think my guy Andy Kaysen from Football Card Quest is going to join me, and we're going to create some content with CGC Cards. They're going to be the only on-site grading company at Fanatics Fest. So we will be there in Orlando. I'll be there on the 2nd and the 3rd. So that's the Saturday and the Sunday. I won't be there on Friday the 1st, but I'll be there on Saturday and Sunday the 2nd and the 3rd. If you guys want to head on down to Orlando, the tickets to get in are very reasonable. It's like $25 for a one-day pass, and I'll see you there. So let's get into the top sports card opportunities to buy raw and grade. I'm looking at the formula-based sports card rankings at nooffseason.com. I'm going to call out a few because I think that there's a lot of time to either get these cards graded, or it's a card that I'm going to name off cards that either there's time to get it graded before it pops off, or it's the player that should rise in value or sustain value during the time period that it would take to get it graded. So I'm going to start with a very, very interesting card because I think a lot of times we make the assumption that when I talk on this show about the raw to grade, that if you go back years for a top player, that there's a low chance at a gem. So, like, for example, if you go back to 2018 for Shohei Ohtani, is it that all good condition Shohei Ohtani's card have already been graded? If you go back to 2019 for Zion, is it that all Zion cards have already been graded that are grade worthy? You know, if you go back to 2020 for Anthony Edwards, you know, is it that all Anthony Edwards cards, right? You get my point, right? Joe Burrow, right? I talked with Jeff Wilson about this on his show, and he brought up he said this, and I didn't take the time to really dispute him on his own show, but I'm going to give you guys a specific example of a card that so far has done very, very well raw to grade for not only myself, but also the members of nooffseason.com who are submitting cards through me at nooffseason.com. Aaron Judge, his 2017 Topps Chrome 169 base is doing very, very well in terms of a gem rate. And the formula says that it's a 31% ROI. The target cost currently is $66 raw based on recent comps. An even more surprising card that's doing very well is the paper version of that card, right? Because who would think out of all cards, especially since we've gone through like the grading boom and how popular the hobby is right now, how many cards PSA grades every month, blah, blah, blah. The Topps paper Aaron Judge from 2017, it's the 287 base, only has a $20 buy-in, but there's more ROI, 41% ROI on that card. That does just as well from a gem rate standpoint based on the cards that we've graded through nooffseason.com. I mean, another one that does very, very well that's kind of surprising is Travis Kelce's cards from 2013 Topps. His 2013 Topps base 31 does very well from a raw to grade standpoint. And there's not only upside in the PSA 10, but there's upside in the PSA 9, which is also the case for the Judge cards that I talked about. $25 buy-in point for the Kelce, 45% ROI for the Travis Kelce. So we're looking at paper cards in two of these last three cases. We're looking at very, very old cards. And in spite of the fact that they're top players, in spite of the fact that we've gone through these grading booms and these hobby booms, these cards are not picked over. There's, in fact, so many of them produced, and it's so easy to find them via avenues of the online marketplaces, especially eBay. And if you do your due diligence, you can make a lot of money on the raw to grade. So this is real data from not only the formula, but our own experience grading these cards. And that leads me to believe that it would just be a contrarian myth that any older cards aren't worth grading because they've already been picked over. It's a contrarian myth. We've done it. You can do it. Let's do it. And let's talk about a few more. Shohei Ohtani's 2018 Topps Chrome 83 T6, 1983 Topps is a $71 buy-in point. That has massive upside in a PSA 10, 60% upside in the PSA 10 for that card. And we've talked about Tiger Woods 2001 Upper Deck Base 1 quite a bit on this show. $17 target cost, $84 projected ROI. We've got a lot of PSA 9s back, so there's upside in the PSA 9. And we've got some PSA 10s back. This is from 2001. Okay, so don't tell me everything's been picked over in the hobby because we're still getting PSA 9s, PSA 10s for these cards. Now I mentioned earlier, I was going to talk to you about some athletes that were still going to be relevant after you get them back. I would say Aaron Judge, Travis Kelce, Shohei Ohtani, Tiger Woods. You could grade their cards, and there's not going to be a whole lot of fluctuation in the upside of their PSA 10s or even PSA 9s. Maybe we're seeing a little bit more uptick in your Judge and your Otanis right now because they're in the playoffs and that's heating up, but it's still Judge and it's still Ohtani. So let's talk about a few other cards in the formula-based sports card rankings raw to grade that could be very interesting. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander 2018 Prism Silver 184, 110 buy-in point, $610 upside in a PSA 10. Formula gives that a 44% ROI. A lot of these cards we've talked about before in terms of CJ Stroud, just about any CJ Stroud card. Go to nooffseason.com and check out which ones, but just about any CJ Stroud card. Travis Hunter is another big one. Many of you have come up and approached me at card shows and said, hey, thanks for the Travis Hunter formula-based recommendation. People are making money off of that. The Bowman Chrome U base is $5, 108 in PSA 10. So worth grading those, 182% ROI. The number one overall card, though, is the Victor Wembanyama 2023 Topps Chrome number 1 base, $23 buy-in point, massive upside in a PSA 10, and a double up in a PSA 9, 290% projected ROI on that card. A lot of other phenomenal cards to go check out in the formula-based sports card rankings at nooffseason.com. There's a lot of Joe Burrow cards that make a lot of sense to grade right now. One of them, I did mention to Jeff Wilson on the Jeff Wilson show. He disputed it, but it's doing very, very well. So go check it out at nooffseason.com. I can't give away all of my secrets here on the Sports Card Strategy Show, giving away some of them for free, but got to get you to go get that free 30-day trial over at nooffseason.com. Let's take a few from the live chat here before I bring in my new really, really good friend who I have met in person at Fanatics Fest, and I have talked to him several other times. Clark Kim from Cards to the Moon and 5 Card Guys. So we'll get to that in a second. Zach Ellsworth asks, trying to decide if it's worth grading a 1-of-1 Superfractor I picked up. I mean, generally not, because you don't need to grade a 1-of-1 to increase its value. And you actually risk it coming back in a different grade lower than a gem mint, which could decrease its value. But Zach, since you're a premium member, ask at nooffseason.com/ask. Give me all the details and I'll give you a much better answer. Catawba Valley Sports Cards, a loyal listener, says, we had some kids at the local Hickory, North Carolina show this weekend, and they were hustlers. Yeah. That's good. I mean, I like kids who are hustlers. I mean, here's the thing. Most of the kids are hustlers, but the kids bringing you good cards, I have no problem with. But the kids that came up to me at the last 2 shows I set up with only had crap, and then I was nice. I'm not mean to kids. I was super nice to the kids, and Mosaic Joe was there, and he's like the nicest guy you'll ever meet. So I couldn't be mean in front of Mosaic Joe. I mean, let's just be honest. But Mosaic Joe and I and Blake, the guy next to me, all super nice to the kids. But I would try to explain to the kids why I wasn't interested in the cards that they were bringing me in the same fashion that I try to do with you guys on the Sports Card Strategy Show. Alandis Brassel is a premium member at nooffseason.com. He's in the live chat and he says, you answered the question I was going to send in for this week's premium pod. I just snagged a sealed Amen Thompson on-card rookie ticket auto, and I was trying to figure out if I wanted to grade it. Alandis, you're the man. I mean, send me that. Send me a photo of that card through the form at nooffseason.com/ask. I'll tell you if I think you should grade it or not. But generally, yes, I would stand by my general answer of it makes sense to grade, but you got to look at here's the thing though, like the reason I really want to still answer it on the premium pod, Alandis, is because that gives me the time to look at the card, see what card it is, do the analysis of raw to PSA 9, raw to PSA 10, look at the gem rate, and look at your card. So I give general advice, but I tried to give very, very specific advice. Jared McDaniel asks, how did the Rattler play work? So far, the Rattler plays worked great. I could tell you, I have this always at my fingertips. I've netted $20 on Spencer Rattler cards from the Panini RPS first look. Now, so you might think, oh, $20. Wow, Paul, $20. But look, I've netted $20, very, very minimal effort selling my Spencer Rattler cards. And I still have about half of my Spencer Rattler cards left. And he's still going to be the starter in New Orleans. I have a high confidence level that, netting, $5 to $10 per Spencer Rattler card sale when I still have about 10 cards left. I mean, look, not everything I'm doing is at that level, that low level. I'm doing a lot of things at the Paolo Banchero level too, right? That I just talked about, the rookie ticket auto PSA 10 level. I've got Victor Wembanyama Prism Silver PSA 10s. That's probably my high point. And my low point is like, look, I'm not above spending $5 on a card that I can sell for 10. And that's what I'm doing with the Rattler play. I've got all the inventory. I'm not going out and buying Rattler cards. I bought it back in May at the RPS first look. Now that he's the starter in New Orleans, that's the reason why I bought those cards. So I'm doing very, very well on the Rattler play. K Cards says, hey, Paul, I used your discount code for Market Movers and I love it. It has really helped me decide when I should and shouldn't grade and protected me from overpaying. It's an awesome app. Thanks, K Cards. Yeah, marketmoversapp.com. Use the promo code NOOFFSEASON to save 20% for life after a free 14-day trial. It's a great resource, and it helps us power the formula. So the formula is a different tool that uses data from eBay, 130-point market movers, etc., to tell you what to buy, which Market Movers doesn't do, but Market Movers does a lot that the formula doesn't do. So that's why I use both. And let's go back to our guy, Michael Bush. Mike Bush says, I was just one, and Michael Bush was a running back for the old Oakland Raiders, I believe. Michael Bush was like a massive running back for the Oakland Raiders. I don't know if this is the same Michael Bush, but Michael Bush says, I was just wondering, for instance, if I have a card that's selling really high right now, should I do regular PSA or should I do express and pay extra so I can get my cards back sooner? I can't give an answer to that question with that level of detail because I need to know exactly what card it is so that I can look up everything and tell you what to do, because I need to know timing on that particular card, who the player is, all the different things. And I need to be able to look up what the raw and the PSA 9 and the PSA 10 prices are so that I can tell you if it's worth a rush fee or if you can just go ahead and bulk submit it. So Michael, I'd love to help you out, but definitely give me, and everybody else out there listening, give me all of your details at nooffseason.com/ask. If you're streaming this right now on Instagram, I will say that Instagram Live only allows for an hour-long live show, and we've had more and more people stream it on Instagram. So what you need to do is either go over to youtube.com/Paul Hickey and watch it live if you can, or what this show's really meant for is for people to watch back later and listen on Apple and Spotify. All right, so what Clark Kim's show is really meant for is giving you a lot of information that we don't talk about on the Sports Card Strategy Show. Let's now bring in my new friend from Cards to the Moon and 5 Card Guys, Clark Kim. All right, now I'd like to welcome in a special guest on the Sports Card Strategy Show, Clark Kim of Cards to the Moon podcast and 5 Card Guys on IG, one of the more popular IG accounts in the hobby, and one of the best new people that I have met this past summer. Clark, how you doing, man? Welcome to the Sports Card Strategy Show.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. And yeah, all those kind words I appreciate for sure. And I can say the same to you. I know we'll get into this in just a second, but we're always brainstorming in terms of what we can do together as content creators. And so I'm hoping to play this on, like you said, my podcast, Cards to the Moon. So any of our Cards to the Moon listeners, you just heard Paul Hickey, host of Sports Card Strategy Show. So you're not wondering who I'm talking to, but yeah, glad to be here and glad to kick things off and see where this goes.
Thanks, Clark. And Cards to the Moon listeners, I am happy to be on Cards to the Moon as well. So thank you for having me, everybody. And okay, so this got started because at the National, I was with a couple good friends in the hobby, Mosaic Joe and Iowa Dave. And Mosaic Joe, I asked Mosaic Joe, we were all kind of squatting in the same hotel room together because it was like impossible to get hotel rooms in Cleveland. And I asked him, okay, I really want to be meeting other content creators in the hobby this year. That's one of my goals between like the National 2024 and the National 2025. Like, let's meet more good people, content creators in the hobby, and see if there's collaboration opportunities, but at the very least, friendships, right? And so your name was the first one that Mosaic Joe said. He's like, well, do you know the Cards to the Moon guys? And I was like, no, I don't, not at all. And he's like, well, they're really good guys. I really like their show. And I think Iowa Dave knows them. And so Iowa Dave, I've been on his show. He's been on our show. And so I asked Iowa Dave the next day at the National about you guys, and he made the intro on Instagram. And then I met you and Hyung at the at Fanatics Fest in Manhattan, and was able to really connect with you guys. And Denny Cards was there with us hanging out.
Yeah.
We had a good time. So thank you for being on the show. Thank you for having me on your show. One thing I wanted to ask you is just give this, now your audience knows this, but give the Sports Card Strategy Show audience just an overview of who you are, how you got started.
Yeah.
Starting five card guides first, I think, and then Cards to the Moon. Maybe talk us through that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So I do have an Instagram and social media account. They all go under Five Card Guys, not Five Guys, the restaurant or the fast food chain, but Five Card Guys. And yeah, you know what? I started like a lot of people right before the pandemic for myself. Just, you know, being 40 something, nostalgic about collecting baseball cards like I did back in the day, and nothing else to do as a side hobby. I got back into it. And what I did with Five Card Guys was I just started posting my own cards and, you know, just showing it off. It was nothing big. And then, you know, I don't have a huge collection, so, you know, my posts ran out really quickly. And so I decided to post other people's more higher end cards, because those are the cards I'm attracted to. And I just kind of did one a day, and the account's been growing ever since. And, you know, now there's so many more cards as the hobby has grown, right? And it's been such a fun ride. But that's essentially Five Card Guys on my Instagram and Facebook, Twitter accounts. And I also started with fivecardguys.com, which is just a blog site where I write about different sports cards topics and rookie cards and things just you know, about the hobby in general. And then you know, from that 2 or 3 years later, you just kind of meet friends, you know, in the hobby. And you know, there's a bunch of local guys here in Toronto where I'm located, and I've known these guys for about, you know, years, and we haven't connected until sports cards, you know, and it was great reconnecting with them. And you mentioned Hyung, who is a co-host on our podcast Cards to the Moon, and we have another friend, John, who is also the other co-host. And we started that about maybe 3-4 years ago. So we're talking at Fanatics Fest New York City, and we found out that we started our respective podcasts around the same time. And, you know, we've just been doing it ever since. And it's been great for us with Cards to the Moon. If you tune in, it's just three friends really just talking about sports cards. What's the latest news? You know, what's our opinion? What's our thoughts? What's our hot takes? And, you know, I think people enjoy it because sometimes we forget we're recording. You know, we're just talking about cards, and, you know, we just make each other laugh. And then we have some fun game segments like over under, or would you rather have this card or that card? And yeah, just have a good time with the pod. And like I said, we've been doing that for 3-4 years now, and it's been weekly. And I thought I was like really, you know, consistent and productive when it comes to podcasting. But then I run into Paul Hickey, who's doing it like 4 or 5 times a week, which is, you know, something I admire, the work ethic, and it keeps me going too. So Anyway, that might be a good segue to maybe introduce yourself to the Cards to the Moon audience, to the Five Card Guys audience. So Paul, yeah, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Clark. I appreciate the kind words. I got started, I would say, in a similar way to you and to many of us in the hobby, where I found my old sports card collection at the end of 2020. At the time, I don't know if we've talked about this, but I lived in Spain at the time. I was in Spain with my family from 2018 through the end of 2022, and at the time I was running my own web design and digital marketing company. I have a background in sports information and fantasy sports that I won't bore you guys with, but grew up collecting cards as a kid and have always been a big sports geek and sports card geek, and just had happened to store my old collection from when I was a kid at my in-laws' house when we moved to Spain. So we were back visiting at the end of 2020, found my old collection, was looking for a new professional challenge at the same time, because the web design and digital marketing business had changed quite a bit throughout the pandemic, and it was successful, but it wasn't as much of a challenge as it once had been to build that business. So I started looking up prices of the cards on eBay in my collection, and not that I had anything really earth-shattering. I had like David Robinson 1989 Hoops rookie, where he's holding up the jersey at the press conference and things like that. Just cards that I really liked as a kid, nostalgia, like you said. And looking up prices on eBay, I just kind of became fascinated with a few different things. Like, number one, the listing price versus the actual sold price. Like, why are people listing different cards for like $5,000 when you filter by sold, it's like maybe a $50 card? It's just the discrepancies. And so I remember sitting there like at my in-laws' house talking about it with my in-laws and my brother-in-law. And my brother-in-law was like, well, there's some of these cards are graded by grading companies and others are raw. And so when he pointed that out to me, just in this initial like discovery, because I had been out of the hobby, like fully out for a long time. Yeah. And that was another fascinating element to me. I'm like, wait a minute. So you can increase the value of your card potentially by grading it. So what I did was I took probably the first 6 months of 2021 and I started creating some content about what I was learning about the hobby, similar to what you're talking about, maybe posting some pictures of some cards. I was touching and feeling like Reddit and Facebook groups and all the things. Posted some things on my YouTube channel. And then it just kind of dawned on me that what I was most passionate about was helping people learn what I had learned. And I actually wrote a book. I never talk about this. I wrote a book in a day about my experience finding my old sports card collection, going through it, grading some card, like creating a spreadsheet of all the cards, grading some of them, not grading others, all that whole experience. Got a PSA submission in before the shutdown at like $12 a card. Didn't get them back till like 2 years later, or 18 months later, like the rest of us. But anyway, wrote a book about that, and then from that book decided, let's create the Sports Card Strategy Show. And at first, so the first episode of the Sports Card Strategy Show aired, I think, in like September 2021. And it was all about just helping people learn from my experience. And then very quickly, after the first probably 10 episodes, I realized what I really want to be doing, that no one else is saying this specifically, but it seems to me that everyone really wants to be making money doing this. Because if you're, and I'm in my 40s too, you said you're in your 40s. If you're in your 40s, there's nothing wrong with having a hobby and a full-time job and a family and all that. That's like what many of us in the hobby are doing. But for me, it was like, if I'm going to be transacting and acquiring sports cards and doing it in lieu of spending time with my family, I pretty much have to justify that in some way. And so to me, it was like, if I'm not making money doing this, it's a pretty expensive hobby, which means if it's not funding itself or I'm not making money, then I'm definitely spending a lot of money that I could be using to support my family in other ways. So it kind of clicked to me that what I want to be doing is actually making money flipping sports cards. And I want to help other people do the same so that they don't get in, spend a bunch of money, realize that they don't like it anymore, and then leave because it's expensive.
Right.
When in reality, you can flip to fund your PC. You can be both. You can be a flipper. You can be a collector. You can do everything, right? And if you're good at flipping, you can have a bigger PC, and you can use some money as side income for your family if you need to. So that's really what I aspired in probably early 2022 to make the Sports Card Strategy Show all about. And so now we're here, like what, almost 2 full years after that, almost 3 years after starting the show initially, feeling like we've built guidelines, strategies, principles, we've built rankings. We know more about how to make money raw to grade. We know about how to maybe make some money on prospecting already graded cards, things like that. So to me, it's like this culmination of all the media information I was working on in sports, the fantasy aspects, sports. I think it's better than sports betting. And I think it's just something that I'm super passionate about. I'm not passionate about collecting. I'm just not. I'm passionate about making money flipping sports cards. But if I can help the collectors in the process and help people make money, then that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, no, that's you did share a lot of that story with me when we met in person, and I think that's what naturally gravitated myself towards what you're doing, because I think there's this recognition that you can do both. Like there's a lot of people that just want one or the other, but then I think we're in the camp where there's a lot of room in the hobby for different kind of collectors and investors, and most of us are kind of both. Like you mentioned that you're more of strictly a flipper or investor. I would say I'm both collector and investor. But what you said about how flipping cards or making money off of cards to fund your PC, that's kind of where I am. That's where I like to be. It was something I had to talk to my wife about. Like once I started buying more cards that cost more money, you had to start justifying that spend, right? And it was much easier to convince her when I said, oh, but I made this much money flipping this card, so I'm just kind of making another purchase that I like even more, and it just happens to be a little bit more expensive, but I think that it could increase in value too, so who knows, right? But yeah, I loved how you share that story for sure.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said what you just said too, because I think I actually don't consume a whole lot of hobby content. I have become a listener of Cards to the Moon, and I love what you guys are doing, and that's one of the reasons why I'm really excited to be able to create content with you. My impression was that the YouTube algorithm at first fed me a lot of like either really positive content or really negative content about the hobby, and some of the negative content was like gloom and doom, like I lost all my money on sports cards and I'm really struggling in life and that kind of thing. And those types of videos were getting a lot of views a few years ago. But really, I think and that makes sense, right? Because people want like true crime stuff. So they want like either the really, really negative stuff or the really, really positive stuff. But I think what you just said is a good example of like where we all sit. I think we all actually sit at this point where we need to be honest with ourselves and our partners in life. I mean, some of us have partners, some of us don't. You and I are both married. We have to be honest with our wives, in our case, about what money we're spending on sports cards. Like because if we don't, if there's no checks and balances, it can get out of control, and you can start to make bad decisions. But as easy as it is to start making bad decisions, it's actually pretty simple to just be fully transparent with the people that you need to be fully transparent with about, hey, look, yeah, I know this card might have cost $250 or even $750 or whatever, but the reality is that I'm funding part of it with sales from these other cards. And so I'm just kind of like always willing to open the dialogue with people about exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
From a flipping standpoint, I like to do that on my show and at nooffseason.com. But since you mentioned that you like to flip to fund your PC, talk to me about like what is your PC? What do you like to buy to collect? I'm fascinated to talk to collectors, and especially people like you who flip to fund their PC, because I struggle with like keeping cards. Like I just don't keep cards. So for someone like yourself who is a highly intelligent flipper of sports cards and collector, like how do you decide who to PC? And then after you decide that, like, how do you do it? Like, what do you go after?
Right. First, I got to dispute you calling me highly intelligent. You know, I'm kind of, just a mediocre collector, but I appreciate that you think highly of me. But no, that's a good question, because I think it's probably a little different for everyone. But I think what's useful for me is having a clear, distinct line in terms of these are my cards that I actually PC, and I probably won't ever sell, because they mean something to me. So that's kind of where I put my PC pile. And a lot of it, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see I'm wearing a Jays hat. You'll see I'm wearing a Jays shirt. So I'm obviously PCing my hometown team, Toronto Blue Jays. It's as simple as that. And I'm sure there's millions of collectors that do the exact same thing. What's my hometown team? Who's my favorite player? The Jays, the 1992-93 World Series back-to-back champs that, I was a teenager back then, so I remember it really well, high-fiving my dad, when Joe Carter hit that home run. So obviously I have Joe Carter autograph cards and John Oler, and like we are, like we mentioned a few times already, we are in our 40s, so we grew up in the junk wax era. None of those cards are worth anything, really. They're just in terms of financial value. So my PC collection is cheap to collect, so I look for those cards, and I look for ones that are, in really good shape, because PSA 10s don't cost that much for a John Olerud or Tony Fernandez rookie cards, or, or those buyback cards that have their autographs on it. I love collecting those because, they're some of my favorite players. On the other side of that line are cards that I really like holding, but I feel like in a few years I can flip for, profit, whatever that might be. So, obviously, and you can speak more on this in terms of investing and flipping, because, you're not going to win 100% of the time. But there are players you have a stronger conviction for in terms of their career, what they've already accomplished, who the hot stars are, how long to hold them. So those are all on my, non-PC collection, and I have no attachment to it really. Although I love the card, like for example, I have a Luka Doncic Contenders Optic blue. It's a color match, number to 99 on card autograph, and I got that for about $6,000. And I just checked recently, there was an alt sale for $9,000. So all of a sudden, I made about $3,000 profit if I sell now. And I'm always waiting for for that basketball card in particular. I'll wait for the Mavs to do well. They're top 5 team in terms of making back to the the championship game. So like it's all about timing, and if someone's willing to pay double 12, 13K, I'm like, that's a pretty good profit. It might be a good time to flip that, and I'll flip it. But I'm always looking to get a bigger card that maybe kind of tying in with what you said with being honest with our significant others. If I told my wife I'm going to buy a $15,000 card, she'll be like, what? Wait, what? We have mortgage payments. We got other things that we could pay about. But then if she knew that I flipped it, I only invested $6,000 originally, and I'm trying to get to a point where I can, get a higher value card that I feel like I could flip even later down the road for 20, 30,000, then it's a little bit more reasonable, or more, she'll be more understanding. She might be, still in awe of how much these cards cost. But, now that we're really in it in terms of being collectors, we know the value of certain cards. We have a better feel for them. And you're always trying to build your collection that way too. So I got my PC stash, and then I got my, investment, kind of my portfolio, if you want to talk in terms of like stock terms and things like that, right? So that's kind of how I do it personally, just kind of have two baskets, and they usually never cross. And so I'm romantic about my PC, but other ones, it could be 20, 30,000. I'm not, one of those types that, oh, this can keep on going forever. If I see an opportunity to flip and I can invest in a card like, the 1986 Flair Jordan, that's been pretty stable, but I'm not willing to pay 80, 90,000 for it right now. But if I could flip up to it, and that's a more stable investment longer term, that's kind of what I'm worked towards myself personally, where there's these short-term flips I like to make to build into more stable investments for those bigger cards. So that's kind of my strategy. So I don't know if that answered your question, but that's kind of what I'm doing now.
Yeah, that was great, man. I mean, I think like on the 1992 Blue Jays, I certainly remember that team and Roberto Alomar, John Olerud, Devon White, Joe Carter, all those guys. What a great team. So I certainly understand the knack to build the PC there. And then you said something, I don't know if you realize this, but you just coined a term, Cards to the Moon listeners. Clark just coined a term on the Sports Card Strategy Show on this little simulcast we're doing. He said non-PC collection, which I actually really love because I'd never heard that before. And the way you described it, I know exactly what it means when the example you gave with the Luka card, because really what that is it's not a quick flip. It's a card that Clark really, really loves. Like he's willing to hold it because he loves the card and he believes in the card. He believes in the card, but he actually really, really likes the card. So he doesn't feel like bad about holding a $6,000 asset to himself.
Right.
Even if I would venture to guess, even if that goes down to 4,000 at some point in the next 12 months, you love the card, right? So you're okay with it. And you feel like, okay, look, if I'm 2,000 under, if I'm 3,000 over, whatever I end up being, I'm enjoying the process of holding the card. I'm enjoying the process of this part of the hobby, basically. And so that's very different than what we typically talk about on the Sports Card Strategy Show and at nooffseason.com. We typically talk about how do we get in and out strategically, quickly to make our profit, not feel bad about leaving money on the table, but mitigate risk of the card going down.
Right.
So that we actually take our profit, whether it's 5, 15, 20, 25%. Hopefully, I mean, we're all trying to get the raw to grade mixed with the selling marker, and then you get the multiplier of like the 10, 20x, and that's certainly possible. But in order to get there, you have to play the game consistently. And when you play the game consistently, you really do break even about 80% of the time. And then the other 20% of the time, you're winning, and maybe 10% of that, 10% of the pie, you're winning really big.
Right.
The other 10% that you're winning, you're maybe moderately winning, and 80% you're breaking even. And so you're moving in and out a lot, which is very different than that sort of non-PC collecting, or really like longer term investing is really what it is. Like you talked about flipping up to that, potentially an example, flipping up to that 86 Fleer Jordan as well, being an example of that. So I think it's interesting to talk about and leave room in our sports card investment portfolios and just collections or cards that we know are not PC. We know we're not going to hold them forever.
Yep.
We know that we're going to sell them at some point, but we're okay holding them for a long time. That's kind of an area that we don't really talk about a lot. And actually, I think you guys post IG reels often about those types of cards, and you guys do a good job at 5 Card Guys and Cards to the Moon on IG, kind of taking a look at like some of these more expensive cards, what they hit the market at, what do they do pricing wise? And that's a little bit different than what we do at the Sports Card Strategy Show, where we're always talking about like only buy a card with the selling marker in mind. Only buy a card after knowing what that end game is going to be like exactly on the calendar. And I think we do that to mitigate risk and really just eliminate all confusion. And like right or wrong, like win or loss, we say like that's execute the play, like continue to execute the play. Can you make adjustments along the way if something happens, player gets injured, hold a little longer, or player goes off, sell now? Those types of things, absolutely you adjust. But for the most part, it's like if you buy 10 raw cards with the intention of grading them and you get them and maybe 3 of them suck, you still grade all 10 for all these different reasons.
Right.
So talk about like, as you and I continue to create content together, what are you hoping to learn and what are you hoping to show the Cards to the Moon audience that maybe they don't already get with your content?
Yeah, no, that's just going off your point. I think we don't talk a lot about the, pure strategy in terms of investing like you do. And that's why I think we kind of, the episodes that we do together, I think will just really be beneficial for each other's audience because you get 2 different perspectives. And just like you're outlining, there's the kind of different ways to invest or look at investing in your cards, whether short, middle, or long term. And, you were saying something before I kind of answer your question more directly, but my non-PC collection, a perfect example of that is my Mike Trout rookie auto. That's gone down a couple of $1,000s, but I'm a big Mike Trout fan. He's just been injured and can't stay healthy, but all I'm hoping is one really good healthy season. And if, I know what he can do and he's going to do what he can do when healthy, then I'm pretty confident that it'll go back up, and I'll be rooting for the player himself as well, not just holding on to the card hoping that I can make a nice profit. So that's kind of another example of someone in my non-PC collection, so to speak. But
that's a perfect example. Okay, I'm going to interject and then you can go. Okay,
go for it.
And then you can come back around and answer the other question. So that's a perfect example, and I think where my path detoured from that is in 2021 and early 2022, and I think a lot of this was where the sports card market was at that time because it was in a very different spot than it is now.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of people having purchased those types of cards, and then on paper they've lost money. Mm-hmm. And they get worried and they start thinking, this isn't working. I'm going to bounce from this hobby.
Right.
And I wanted to help people with timing the market a little bit better, I guess. And I think this speaks to, I think you and I being on the same page with those types of cards, with the Luka card and the Mike Trout rookie auto that you talked about, where it's like, you do have to be willing for those types of cards to go down and be okay with holding them. Whereas I think most people aren't okay with that. Right. And so because most people aren't okay with that, I went in this direction of being like, okay, I'm going to help people find these ways to get in and out faster so that they can make money and then decide, like, do they want to put more money into cards or do they want to put money into wherever they put their money is fine with me.
Yeah.
But I just think like that's a very important thing because I think a lot of people think that sports card investing is like other investing, where like if you invest in a mutual fund or you invest in a stock, you can follow certain principles in those markets to stay in the market because it's going to go back up. And like sports card investing is its own beast. So
for sure,
it's almost like you have to have a Luka, you have to have a Mike Trout for that to work. You can't go buy, like where people lose is like they're going to go buy a Cam Thomas card, or like, even Ellie De La Cruz, is super risky, right? Because he may end up being, a Hall of Famer, but he may just be a really good first 5-year player of his career, and then he might fizzle out. And so people investing money in his big cards, like his superfractors or his low serial numbered cards, I mean, they need to know what they're getting into, and it's not just a set it and forget it thing. It really is getting in and out faster. But I really wanted to just kind of give the audience like my take on that, because I think it's important to sort of define those types of like active GOAT type plays with bigger cards are very, very different. You can't just set it and forget it. You have to have a strategy. And then even more so, like with younger guys that you're prospecting on, it's definitely more important to get rid of their cards. I personally think you're going to do just fine with both of those cards. But anyway, sorry to take us off track there. I know you were gonna answer a little bit more directly to my question, but I
feel like you've answered your own question for my audience, right? So that's perfect, because and what I want to say is that for Cards to the Moon listeners, and I've a lot of it is dealing with more higher end cards, more longer term holds, and just kind of building up that collection. But then there's all that stuff in between to get to that point, which is what I feel like your content covers much better than ours. We don't actually cover any of that really. And over the years, since I've been doing the pod, there have been some collectors saying, hey, we really like your show, but we can't relate 90% of the time because these are so high end, although they like listening to like these big hits. And, who doesn't like seeing breaks where someone hits a monster Victor Wembanyama card, right? It's a spectacle of it. But some of them do want to, really practically get in the hobby. So that's what I feel like people will get from listening to your content in general. So if you haven't listened to the Sports Card Strategy Show, you should definitely subscribe. But even in our interactions, I'm sure in our future episodes, we can talk about, how you do things in terms of how you help collectors, and then, people that want to think longer term or venture out into these higher end cards, and how the news plays into all of this. That's kind of what we do at Cards to the Moon. We see what are the headlines that everyone's talking about, but what, I think we talked about this at FanFest, right? It's like, what we try to answer on our pods, like, why do we care? Why does it matter? And what are some of the implications of this hobby news, that can impact everything from the value of the cards themselves to, where the hobby is going in, 2, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And, we like to just think about those things more deeply. So that's kind of what you'll get from our pod. But from Sports Card Strategy Show, like, I love how, I was just listening to your past episode, like we don't go deep into the weeds on like what cards to collect and how to flip and what the timeline is. We don't do any of that, right? But I think it will be valuable for some that do want to get into that, because it's in a lot of ways more accessible to them. And, you can try with like, it's funny, we both talked about like these Topps Now Panini Instant type cards in our respective pods, and how that's, the landscape for those cards are changing too. And how do we navigate? You're talking more about like, oh, there's opportunities to make a profit. For us, it's more like, we love the gambling aspect of it, but is there going to be a time when the government's going to come in and say, hey, Topps Now, you got to, you can't do this anymore. So what then? So different perspectives on the same kind of, hobby issues and topics that are being widely discussed right now. But that's what I appreciate about your content. That's why I think it will be valuable to current Cards to the Moon listeners as well.
Thanks, man. Yeah, and you just nailed exactly what I'm excited about too, and I think our audience will be excited about it. I mean, let us know, audience. Reach out to both of us. You know how to get us, and let us know what you want to hear as we collaborate on content. But for me, I mean, we don't talk about hobby news that much. I look at hobby news, and I told you this when we met. I look at a lot of hobby news and I go, I don't care about that. Like
Right.
what does that, how does that affect me? Now, a lot of people, but just because I personally don't care about it doesn't mean that I don't need to do a better, it probably still means I need to do a better job of understanding why it could be valuable to our audience. And so that's what I know that you're going to help me with, because you guys do a really good job thinking through that and covering that on your show. And the more that we talk and the more that we collaborate together, I'd like to have you help me bring some topics to the table that you think are relevant, and I'll like, give you like a friendly challenge of like, oh, well, that's stupid. And then you can be like, no, Paul, this is actually why you need to care about this. And then,
Right.
but I need that more, just in general, because I don't really pay attention to hobby news. Like I barely even pay attention to upcoming releases. And so I think, but I mean, if anything, if I need to be paying attention to any hobby news, it's definitely upcoming releases. It's definitely thinking through things that you guys are thinking through. And some of it's going to be like, yeah, that doesn't really matter. But some of it's going to be like, yeah, that is definitely going to have an impact on the weeds. We're definitely in the weeds, Clark. We're definitely we're definitely looking at like, hey, you buy this Panini Instant card for, it's $9.99 per card, but if you buy 25 of them, that's $109 plus tax and shipping US, and then that brings your cost per card down to this, and then you put that plain white envelope on it, go to 1 ounce, because the 1 ounce means 69 cents instead of $1.25, and now we are like all in the weeds. So awesome. I think between our two shows and our audiences, they're going to end up getting a nice balance for sure.
Agreed. Yeah. And then, like you said, I think as we do more of these, it'll evolve, just like our respective podcasts. The way we started is not the way we're doing things now, but we'll figure it out. And I think whatever brings the most valuable to our respective audiences, I think that's going to be the key at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I'm all about that. I mean, I only really care about bringing value to the audience at the end of the day. And I'm looking forward to learning about what the Cards to the Moon audience thinks is valuable. And in addition to the Sports Card Strategy Show audience, of course. So, hey, thanks for having me on your show, and thanks for being on my show. Really
Likewise.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. We'll talk soon.
Everybody. Clark Kim, Cards to the Moon, 5 card guys. Check them out. And let us know what you want us to collab on to bring you guys the most value. Thanks, everybody. Clark Kim, thanks again for your time, my man. Chad Dyer in the live chat, loyal audience member of all the NoOffSeason.com shows, says Cards to the Moon rocks. Founded about 3 months ago. Yeah, and thanks to Mosaic Joe and Iowa Dave for helping essentially introduce me to Clark and Hyung and Cards to the Moon, 5 card guys. Great guys, great content. Check them out and stay tuned for more collabs from Clark and I as we try to bring our two audiences together and improve both of our content. So a couple things here before we sign off on the Sports Card Strategy Show. We say hello to Degenerate Card Collector, says caught you live. He's excited about that. And some grading discussion here. Koa Carrero, one of the loyal premium members at NoOffSeason.com, has a little case study here telling everybody in the live chat, and Jared McDaniel was answering a question earlier to Michael Bush, I believe, about grading a card. Jared said send the card to Paul. So send the card to Paul. I can tell you his process is flawless when he ships them to PSA. Thank you so much. And then Koa, here's Koa's case study. Submitted a Wemby cracked ice that came back at 6. I could see nothing wrong with it. He cracked it, submitted it to me, and Paul resubmitted it to PSA, and it came back at 10. And so Terry Anderson, wow, a 6 to a 10. Yeah, so that was, I'm glad that you guys are talking about that one, because I was very, very happy for Koa. And Cyrus DeHoyt says, random question. What kind of sports card box would you hold for the long term and not rip and open? Koa says, that's a great question. And I saw that come in and I wanted to answer it. So just real quick, Cyrus, I struggle with this. I wouldn't do this because it's like, so the answer to this question is like a 2020 Prism football, right? Or a 2020 Contenders football, because you've got Burrow, Tua, Herbert, Love, Hurts in there. You want a box like that. So you want a box like an upcoming Prism 2024 with Caleb, with Jaden, with the first round quarterbacks, right? The problem is, the box is going to rely on all the different quarterbacks in the release. So the price of the box, say if JJ McCarthy sucks, is going to come down even if Caleb Williams is in it, right? If Michael Penix sucks, it's going to come down even if Jaden's in it, right? So it's almost like this sealed wax game is almost like a dual auto, like one player that you don't like and one player that you like. It's going to be negatively affected by the crappier player. The other thing I don't like about this strategy with sealed wax is redemptions. A lot of times autos are redemptions in this day and age. And so if you hold a box of sealed wax long-term, the redemption can expire. And so it brings down the price of the wax. The other thing I don't like about this is when a hit gets hit, like a 1-of-1 superfractor or a gold prism of a player that, or a low serial numbered auto of a player, depending on the release, is hit. It can drive down the price of the wax because less breakers want it. Less people would want it if a hit is already taken out. Chad Dyer says, friends don't let friends buy wax. Just say no. Dare to keep kids off wax. All of the above. I totally agree. Any other questions? Definitely go to nooffseason.com/ask. Get a free 30-day trial. I will definitely answer there. And stay tuned for more great content from the Sports Card Strategy Show. Moving forward, thank you so much for all of your support, everybody. Don't forget to check out nooffseason.com and get a free 30-day trial. Have a great day. Thanks so much for being here with us on the Sports Card Strategy Show. To connect with us further, please subscribe to the YouTube channel at youtube.com/Paul Hickey. Please also give us a follow on Instagram at Sports Card Strategy and on X at NoOffSeasonCard. We also have a Discord that you could join at sportscardstrategy.com. Everyone, I'm Paul Hickey. For the rest of us here at nooffseason.com, have a great day. We'll see you again soon.